Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Grace of a Military Child in Life. Today, I'm here with Vimbo, who is a military spouse. So, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So, tell me what it's like being a military spouse.
Oh, wow. It's nothing like what you see on TV.
Very
Um,
true.
because when I started dating my husband's in the Navy. And so when we started dating a few years ago, I remember my older sister called me on the phone. She was like, "Have you ever watched Army Wives?" Which, like I said, my husband's in the Navy.
Yes.
It's nothing like what it looks like on TV. I would describe being a military wife, especially where we're stationed now and just being so close to the buzz and so many other branches of military. I would describe it as having this like amazing community I kind of knew existed, but being a part of it um, is really special. I think if I could also use some other words to describe it, it's been a hard adjustment. Definitely a harder adjustment than I think I realized it could be. Um, but overall, I think there's a lot of like rewarding aspects to military life, being a military spouse, getting to support my husband, whether he's here or, when he's been deployed in the Navy, they call it underway. So when he's
Yeah.
gone on his little submarine ship, there's hard times, there's good times, but it's definitely been an adjustment, being a military spouse.
Yeah, because like you said, it's not what you see on TV. It's not Army I've never watched it, but I know it's not Army Wives.
Yeah,
It's
no, it's
not
not.
Top Gun, it's not
No,
nothing you
no.
see there. And even the movies where they try to make it very, non-fictional and very real, and there's so many details that they miss out from the family's perspective that it's just
Right,
not.
right.
So, there's that, and then, like you said, there's so much that you have to adjust to, and moving
Yeah.
and, deployments and just everything, but the community aspect is what is really, really the, like, most rewarding thing ever with
Yes,
military life.
absolutely. I would agree. And like we live on a base now for the first time in our marriage, and that alone, it's just like I love our neighbors. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
I'm like the poster child for some of the best aspects of it, but I mean, we have little coffee meetups and
Yeah.
there's just a lot of community. If you're looking for people to connect to, there are a lot of different ways to connect.
Yeah, and especially, living on base, it's like everything's right there. You have neighbors who are going through the exact same thing you are. You have like all of access to all of the events, and it's hard when you're not living on base and you're living, we were reserve family, so living far away from base.
Yeah.
That's really hard. And not having that community because that's really what gets you through the lifestyle.
Yes. 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 You need other people that you can talk to and commiserate with who know exactly how it is
Right.
going through it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because, talking to people who are like, "Yeah, I have my friends back home," but they don't know what military life is. They just, they know the movies, they know TV, and they try to understand the best of their abilities, but you cannot put somebody exactly in your shoes and say, "This is what I'm going through. This is what it's like having, you know, your favorite person in the world gone
Yeah.
for extended periods of time."
Hmm. I totally agree. Yes. Yeah. It's hard. Um, I think it was, yeah, like you said, a hard adjustment for even my friends or close family who I've always told everything. And now there are
Yeah.
like just things you don't talk about,
Right.
because you can't for
Yeah.
people's security. And so yeah, that's been an adjustment for them as well.
That's another thing is people don't understand OPSEC. They don't like they don't know
Yeah.
that. And so like I
Yeah.
even scroll through social media. I'm like, that should not be here. That should not be here. Like, um, there were there was something a couple weeks ago with the White House. They put something out and it's like caused up a huge uproar. They're like, those are people who should not be shown. Like
Oh, yikes.
and so but
Yeah.
yeah, operational security is a whole ordeal that, you have to instantly learn as a family member, And
Mhm.
then, not being able to tell people things, it's like, "Oh, well, where's, your husband or your dad or mom, where are they being deployed to?" And it's like, "Oh, I wish I could tell you. I wish I
Right.
even knew."
Right, right, right. And I know it varies by branch, but I know
Right.
at least with the Navy and within the Navy, submarines are a smaller group. Um, but I know, so when my husband and I we got married just a couple within the last couple of years, and we actually had to plan our wedding date around when they would approve for him to, because we were dating
Yeah.
long distance. So he had to like fly to come get married to me on the other side of the country,
Oh my
and it couldn't be
gosh.
too close. I know it was a whole thing.
Yeah.
So like it couldn't be too close to when they were going underway. And like you said, we had been dating long distance. So as soon as we get married, everyone's wondering, when is he next going underwater? And I'm like, I kind of know, I think, but not really. And also, even
Yeah.
if I did know, I can't tell you. So there's all this pressure. And then as soon as I moved to where my husband was stationed, we were outside of Seattle at the time. That was also just, I will say this, the military did a really good job of providing me as a family member, me as a wife, with the information I needed.
Yeah.
And so I had everything I needed to be successful and to not compromise OPSEC,
Yeah.
operational security, or my purse sec, because when my husband was gone, they also advised us as military spouses, like, don't post on Facebook that your house is empty so that
Yeah.
thieves can come and steal. Because when my husband was gone, I wasn't working at that time, and so I could travel and be with family, so I wasn't so home and alone.
Yeah.
Um, but those are all just things you don't think about, because I always post about, hey, I'm in California, hey, I'm here. Like, you don't always think about that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you really have to be intentional with the way you think about it. And like, yes, like we want to share when our loved one is going away or when they're coming home, but like you just can't. And it sucks sometimes and it's hard to put that into perspective for some people, but like they don't realize the amount of security that's given up for not only them saying, "Oh yeah, they're going on deployment," like here's where they're deploying to. Um, you know, security with that, but then also the security for you because like you said, your personal security, like you're home alone, like being having the ability to travel, like you can't just say, "Oh, yep, I'm gone now." Like and having the privilege to live on base, it's a little easier because you know, it's security on base, but
It feels
still,
safer, yeah.
like, you have to be so aware of
Yeah.
literally every move you make as a military family member. Even as kids, like, we couldn't step out of line. Like, we could not
Mm,
mess up even in school, like, because if you got in trouble in school, your
hmm.
service member got in trouble as well. And I've
Oh,
heard horror stories of people getting demoted because of their child's behavior.
oh
So
no.
and I've heard
Yikes.
horror stories of, being stationed overseas in, like, Japan or
Hmm.
Germany and, kids families being sent home because of a child's poor behavior in another
Oh
country.
wow.
So
And that's so hard for the kids involved. Like,
right,
we don't have kids, but I think about that because I'm like, the lifestyle, um, there are resources available that explain how things like deployment and moving so often can really impact a child at different stages of development. And like,
right,
babies don't really understand what's going on. When they're a little bit younger, they may think it's exciting and fun. And then you get to the teenage phase when they're like apathetic and they're like, oh, dad or mom is gone again. Like, so that's so not fair. That makes me sad. Mhm.
Yeah, and, like, kids just I mean, they're kids, and it's hard to control kids, and, I was not a fan of my teenage years. I'm glad they're
Mm,
long gone.
same.
But, like, it's hard to do that, but, we're raised with higher standards. We're raised with, being respectful of those around us, and, I mean, everyone should be raised with that anyways, but, we're raised to those higher standards that, like, if we like mess up so badly, if our behavior is so poor,
Mhm.
we're not the only ones getting the consequences, from our school or community, that, and then home, double
Mhm.
consequences there, but then you're
Both
also
places.
getting the consequences that your parent gets from their chain of command. Like,
Yeah,
there's
that's
so
a
many
heavy
going on.
burden. That's a
Yeah.
very heavy burden for a child to bear, I feel like.
Yeah, so we, like, there's so many pieces, like, security, like, behavior, everything, there's so
Yeah.
much as a child that you have to just, like, instantly grasp onto.
Yeah. Yeah, that is pretty heavy for a child, and I can't imagine, like I think there are so many, layers to the way that being in the military impacts both the service member, as well as the spouse, as well as the children, and then, getting a little bit outside of even that circle, as well as everybody who loves that family, it's
Yeah.
just like it's such a ripple, it's huge.
Yeah, you really have to learn a whole new lifestyle when somebody you love joins the military or is in the military, or,
Yeah.
because so much can go wrong so quickly.
Yes. Yes.
And,
Yes.
like, one little social media post can you literally put lives on the line.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's insane to think about that, because you would
Yeah.
not imagine that being with any
Being
other
a
career field.
thing. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's heavy. I think like luckily where we were before, um it was like a Navy town. Like we were outside
Yeah,
of Seattle in a place where luckily even if you weren't in the military, a lot of people were very understanding and everyone did kind of know the expectations, so people weren't as intrusive.
right.
Um, and then even here, like being where we are now, there are a lot of other branches around, so still there's similarly like that. But like you said, because of social media, anything can be anywhere.
Yeah,
And if you don't know, and you don't stay in the loop as a spouse, you may not be aware that some of the things you may be posting, you think it's just an innocent post. But do you really, how well do you really know your 800 friends on Facebook or the person you went to middle school with, like, or the fact that maybe their account was hacked, like,
exactly, that's what I was just thinking.
yeah, yeah. It's just like everything's, if I put it online, I assume it's probably public knowledge and
And if you
anyone,
tag someone, then it shows up on theirs, and
yeah,
literally,
yeah.
it's a whole web.
It's a whole web. It's a whole web. But no, but yeah, there were definitely a lot of adjustments. I definitely say like the OPSEC, the PERSEC. I know also for myself, like, and this is something it's looked different at different times, but adjusting to the needs of your service member kind of coming first in many ways. Whether it's like where we live,
Yeah, that's a big
or
one.
that's a huge one. Where we live and when we live there, like
Yeah.
where and when we live in places and when we move. Um, because when we got married, I had my own career. Like I had been a teacher for many years. I had been an elementary school principal for 5 years through the pandemic. Um,
Wow, that's
yeah, so
incredible.
thank you. Thank
Incredible.
you. Thanks. So like I mean, I will admit I was definitely burned out. And
Yeah,
that was like not a secret. I was very burned out. And
yeah,
so getting married and leaving my principal position was like not bad for me. I was happy to do it. I was like, I feel like this is a new chapter of my life and now I can do something different. Maybe still education adjacent, but maybe
mhm,
who knows, right? But there was definitely like a mourning period. Because my spouse, I don't know, everyone has different spouses. So I can't speak for every person's military experience. I can only speak of my spouse, my husband, and how we made the decisions we made.
mhm,
But I was fortunate enough where we made the decisions together. We said, hey, we want to get married, and you live here and I live here. well, one of us can quit our jobs without going to prison, right? Like one of us has not
Which one
signed
of
our
it is it?
right. Like one of us has not signed a contract with the US government and a kind of
Right.
very binding contract for the
Yes.
years that we're in right now. Um, so it was an easy yes because it was like, well, we've done the long distance dating thing. We don't want to do a long distance marriage. We love each other. We want to be in the same place. I'm happy to leave my job. And that is still true. That doesn't mean, I mean, two things can be true at the same time. I can be happy to be with my husband and make the choices I believe are best for our family. And I can still mourn not being able to continue doing something I maybe saw myself doing for a longer period of time.
Right.
Um, and so I've worked through that. I thought through that, and in my situation, I ended up very fortunate that now I still get to do something I love. I get to be the director of a nonprofit, which is remote work,
That's
which
incredible.
is, yeah, it's wonderful. Our nonprofit actually operates a children's home and a school in the country I was born, which is in Zimbabwe.
Oh, I
And so
love
even
that.
yeah, thanks. I love it too. I'm relatively new to the position, but as a military spouse who I right now in this season of our lives, like we have to value things like mobility. I have to be able to take my job with me if
Yeah.
the government needs my husband somewhere else. I value things like flexible hours, like
Yes.
all of these things, right? Like as long as I'm getting the job done, I can kind of make my own schedule at this point. And so I say I'm very fortunate because I've met even here where we live, military spouses who that's not their experience. You know, whether they have kids or don't have kids, all of the different factors of just being in the military have really impacted a lot of spouses' abilities, I think, to just get a job
Right.
or not just get a job, right? Like do something that they love, be
Right.
immersed in that, and then kind of commit to it any long-term amount of time. That's just really hard in our position.
Yeah. And I think, you know, as women today, we just strive to have a career and
Yes.
strive to, you know, be that person who can provide for their family as well. I think that's just how driven,
Yes.
you
Our
know,
generation, yeah.
yes. And so it's hard to be a military spouse and as well have a career. And there are so many military spouses that I talk to who are in the medical field or in the
Oh.
education field. And with that,
Hmm.
you have licensing. And so you can't necessarily say, "Hey, I'm gonna pick up and move to Texas," or, "Hey, I'm gonna pick up and move to, Virginia or Seattle," or all of these different places, or even like Germany, like you can't pick up and move to Germany and take your license with you.
Yeah.
You have to relicense
Yeah.
everywhere you go. And
Yes.
there are laws that are making it a little easier, but you can't just do that and hope that there's a career for you there.
Yeah, I was going to speak right to that because I had my administrative license in Florida, which is where I was
Mhm.
before. And then when we got married, I moved to Washington State and it was relatively easy. For whatever reason, whoever I talked to on the phone was like, "Oh, you're a military spouse." We weren't even married yet. This person, I don't know their name, so I hope I'm not getting anyone in trouble, but they knew I was getting married to someone in the military and that's why I was
Yeah,
moving to that state. And so they made that process like super easy. At the time, it was before some of these more recent laws. So I did pay still to get that new license in the new state, but they fast tracked my application, which was such a help. And then, but so licensing is one thing, and then just trying to find a position is another thing. So
right.
going to Washington State, I had a super easy job getting a license there. I had a I I couldn't find a job as an administrator because when you're switching school systems at an administrative level, they really want to see that you've taught in their school system first.
Mm,
So it was kind of like, well, I love the classroom, I love children. That's not where I feel like I'm being drawn to right now at this point in my career. So I didn't end up working as an administrator while we were out there because I couldn't find a position that spoke to me and I felt really passionate about. And then now in the nation's capital, it's really funny because licensing has been a nightmare.
My
And I have
gosh.
had to, yeah, I've had to email the offices of the DC people who do licensing for educators, which luckily my current position, I'm not actually acting as a school principal, so I don't actually need it.
Right.
But out of wanting to keep my license current, it's easier to just keep it current. I've had to email them the laws that have been signed into place recently. And I'm like, no, no, no. Like, not only do you need to show reciprocity, but you should actually waive the fee based on this law. And I literally had to pull up the news article I'd just been reading with my husband because these people were just like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. We never waive the fee. And we also
Oh
don't
my
provide
gosh.
reciprocity for other states. So luckily, once I emailed that and like I named whatever statute it was or whatever
Yeah.
law, they like replied back and were like, okay, send us your stuff. And I'm like, it shouldn't be this way. And can you
Right.
imagine being a military spouse who doesn't know? Because you don't always know. Things are always changing. Like, it's insane.
And there's
It's,
so much information out there. It's so which, like, with, that on the legal aspect, but then with also on the aspect of here are some different resources and organizations that can help you throughout every single stage of your military career. Like, we don't as a child or as a spouse, you don't get handed a handbook saying this is how you complete military life. And there is never going to be an all-inclusive handbook, because
right.
there's always new things, there's always things changing, there's always new organizations, being formed, new resources coming out. And so you really have to do the research yourself, and
Yes.
that's the hardest part, and then if you don't do that research by yourself, you're gonna miss out on so many opportunities that
Yeah.
or so much help. There's like you said, you shouldn't have to pay for your licensing every time you move, but
Right.
do you know how many spouses out there are paying for their license every time they move because they don't know
Oh,
that? Like, I can
yeah.
only imagine.
Yeah,
Until
that's
somebody,
hard.
comes in and says, "You don't have to pay for it. Here's where it
Right.
says you don't have to pay for it."
Right.
So,
Yeah.
it's a lot of research.
It's a lot of research, and I somehow my husband did a little bit of research too because I didn't even know how many other resources were even available if you get to a state or a place that's like, hey, we're not going to waive this even though you moved for the military. We're just going to what for whatever reason we still want to charge you. My
Mhm.
husband did research on all of the resources that are available through the military for
Yes.
spouses for things like tuition reimbursement and even licensure that I hadn't been aware of. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, at least I have the time to do this and research this. But like if I had a small child, if I was trying to keep another human alive besides my husband, like
Right.
this is just you just don't have the time to do it. And I know that's like a bad excuse, but um I do know that there are a lot of people working to try to make that information more accessible to
Yeah.
military spouses. Um, so I know there's an effort and they recognize like, hey, we have these resources. They're not always used. Okay, there's some kind of disconnect between what's being offered and the people who actually need it. So
Right. And I think
yeah,
that's one benefit of being connected with your chain of command because they often know the
yeah,
resources. But if you don't reach out to somebody and say, "Hey, I need help with this," or "Do you have any advice or resources or anything that you could offer some insight to this?" then, they don't necessarily say, "Oh, person A needs help with this and person B needs help with this." They can't read anyone's mind, you know?
no, yeah,
They can't just
exactly.
say, "Hey, like, oh, you need help with this? Here you go." But if you reach out and say, "Hey, I need help with this. Is there any resource?" And I don't like reaching out for help. Like, I'm so independent, like, I'd rather do it
Yeah,
myself. Um,
yeah,
but I've learned a lot. The worst you can get is no. Like,
right,
and if you
right,
can get that
right,
mindset of,
right,
"Okay, the worst thing that's gonna happen is someone's gonna tell me no," then
right.
you can
Then
move
you can do
forward.
anything.
Exactly. You can really do anything because if you're okay with being told no, then there is nothing stopping you.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I love that mindset. Yeah, I found out. so many random things just because I've asked. So it's definitely you have to ask, and that could be anything from like asking your neighbor if you live on a
Yes.
base, just being like, "Hey, how did you figure this out?" or "I'm having this issue," or like whatever the case is. Yeah, you just never know until you ask.
Yeah.
So
And,
yeah.
exactly that, like, if you don't know somebody in, your chain of command to ask, like, it's so
Hmm.
easy to just, you know, knock on your neighbor's door or send a
Yes.
text or,
Yes.
everybody loves those Facebook groups for the bases. It can
Yeah.
be both good and bad.
It
Um
can be sticky, but
So, like, make a post on there.
yeah.
There's so many different resources and ways that you can get information. It's not just going through, the military, going through chain of command, but it's also like, like you said, you work for a nonprofit. I work for a nonprofit. Like, there are so many different nonprofits out there doing
Yes.
so many different missions around the world. And there are
Yes.
tons of military related ones that, there is somebody who's there to be able to, you know, fund something for you or
Yes.
help you or just give you even a single piece of paper with information on it. There's so much
Right.
that is out there that you can, utilize. That's what
Yes.
it's there for.
Yes. No, absolutely. Like I have realized there's a network of people who are really rooting for and wanting to support military families. There's just a whole host of organizations, I think everywhere, but I feel it more because of where we live now, because we're in the nation's capital. And so
Right.
there are things like Blue Star Families and
Yes.
the Rosie Network. And there's all sorts of, I just stumbled upon something called Spousely, where it's like
I
they're
love
promoting,
Spousely. I
it's so
love
great.
Spousely.
Yeah, it seems like such a great connection of like, hey, if you want to shop military, I think it's military and first responders, but
Yes.
if you want to support people who are, putting their lives on the line, or family members of people who are putting their lives on the line, here, shop here. And I love that because it's like we all everyone gets help somehow, to get to where they are. And so it's just nice that the community wants to like support and help military spouses. I love that.
Yeah, no, I love Spousely so much, and, like, so many people are so creative, and,
Yes.
going back to how hard it is to have a career being a military spouse,
Uh-huh.
um, you know, people are just entrepreneurs and making their own careers and making products and using their creativity and their passion to drive other things with their products and the way that they can support, like, the Dainty Forces Co., my favorite,
Hmm.
like, jewelry.
Oh, I haven't
She
even
makes
stumbled on
so
that
many
yet.
things, yes, you should check her out, she is incredible. Her and her husband are stationed in Hawaii, and,
Oh,
she wanted to wear jewelry to be able to support her husband, but she wanted, like, little tiny pieces,
oh,
like, small,
nice.
simple stuff, and so she started making jewelry to be able to support her husband, and sells it
Oh,
now. And so there are so many wonderful, businesses that these spouses start
yeah.
up because they can't necessarily have their own career. Um,
Hmm.
and so they're entrepreneurs and support their spouse in that way. And it's really
Yeah.
amazing.
That is very amazing. Yeah, like that's the truth is a lot of these people who've created these small businesses or become entrepreneurs, it's really out of necessity a lot of the time. Like
Yeah.
you want to support the bottom line of your family, you want to keep moving towards your financial goals, whether it's buying a house, whether it's whatever the case is, because
Yeah.
military people still want to buy houses. Like military people still have financial goals. They still have maybe kids they want to send to college at some point. Like
Yeah.
so all of that comes together to make something really beautiful. And yeah, I'll have to check out that jewelry company. That sounds really
Yes.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. There's like and that's one reason I love Spousely, and being
Yes.
able to it's Etsy for military and first responder families, and it's
Yes.
so cool, and
Yeah.
oh my gosh, no, I love Spousely. Uh, just love it every time someone brings it up.
Yes. I love it too. I love, love, love
Yes.
it too.
Yeah. So the last thing I do want to ask you though is what advice would you give to another military spouse?
So, I think my biggest advice I would give to a military spouse is allow yourself to feel what you're feeling. I think that's a really powerful form of self-care. In my past, I mentioned I've been an educator before, and something we really teach children as a part of trying to help them with their emotional health is like acknowledge your feelings, and it's something I know from having gone through therapy myself as an adult, like acknowledge your feelings. Like, are you sad that your service member is gone? Like, it's okay to be sad. Like, it's actually really good that you feel sad. I remember years ago, I read a book by Brene Brown, and she talks about like all sorts of stuff. But she talks about research that shows that we cannot selectively numb. So if you choose to not feel the sadness, you also can't exactly feel the joy at the same level when your service member comes home. And so I know that was really hard for me. My husband's first deployment is I was like, oh my Lanta, like I am counting down the days till this guy is home. We were
Yeah.
newly married, like we got married, we went on our honeymoon, and like within a few weeks, he was on a submarine far away. All we could do was email. It was terrible.
Yeah.
And I let myself allow it to be terrible. I didn't stay in bed all day and cry. There were a couple days like that. No, no, no. Let me take that back. There
There
were some
were.
days I did that. Yeah. And I think like let yourself feel the feelings, because when you don't, and process them obviously, and like in healthy ways, obviously, like
Right.
journal and go on a walk and do all like the hashtag self-care, like whatever your stereotypical or what works for you. Those are ways you can help yourself process and like self-soothe, and also realize like it's okay if you feel that hole in your heart, because like hopefully, God willing, they will come back. They will be back on your front door. You will get to be reunited with them. We focus on that, but we also let ourselves feel those feelings. And I wish I had like embraced that a little bit earlier in my military spouse ness. I wish I had recognized like you don't always have to be the strong one. Like you were saying, having trouble asking for help. That's me too. Like I struggle recognizing when I need something. And just a quick example along those lines. I remember I had a really dear friend when we were stationed out in Washington State. She was so sweet. She was like the head of our FRG, our family group for our boat. And um she we got connected, and she wanted me to start helping tutor her son, and I was like, sure, I have time to be,
Yeah.
I'm just at home sad, and I love humans. I'm an extrovert. But we did it in exchange for she would make a meal for me. She was already cooking for her kids, and so I got to have a meal with like a family, and
Oh,
she got tutoring for her son. And in that way, it was like, well, both of us were benefiting because I was doing something. I love tutoring anyway. Um,
yeah.
I get a meal with people who are warm and welcoming, and we're all going through the same thing. We're all missing, for her, it was her husband, and for her kids, it was their dad. For me, it was my husband. But we're all going through very similar things. And so, yeah, just let yourself feel the things, and also ask for what you need and allow people to help you. I think those would be my biggest pieces of advice, is like accept help.
Yeah. Absolutely. And where can listeners connect with you at?
Oh, I love this. Okay, so I am on all the things. So I am at Vimbo. It's like limbo, but with a V as in Victor. I am at Vimbo Watson, on Instagram, uh, on like LinkedIn, on Facebook. LinkedIn is so adult-like, but like
Yes.
Facebook and Instagram, I have pages there where I post about like honestly mostly just like self-care for millennial working women, and some education stuff because I'm still an educator at heart. So, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much,
Yeah.
Bimbo, for being on the podcast. I loved
Yeah.
having you.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Yes, absolutely.